Do you like watching eclipses? Of course you do. Who doesn't? Especially if you don't have to go outside to see one, right? So let's watch a whole bunch of them together and talk about whether or not these ones were visible from Gobekli Tepe or to a wider audience of observers around Turkey and the Fertile Crescent during the early Pre-Pottery Neolithic. The 9.3 number below is how long it takes for one lunar node, or one of the two places the moon crosses the ecliptic, to return to the solstices, which we're going to compare to the carbon data over 500 years. For one lunar node to go all the way around the ecliptic takes 18.6 years, but you don't have to remember any of that. It's for anyone at the universities who might be watching, because this is being reviewed, I think. And this is the carbon data from Gobekli Tepe. We're just going to look at the top half today. They give a plus or minus error rate of 30 years, but when combined, they eliminate margins of error, all these different samples. You'll see the pattern is set from the first spike to the last in Enclosure D alone. Each notch is 50 years on the chart here, but I'll make it easy to follow. I added all the lines in a failed effort to figure out the precise years, but it just works better if I use the left edge of your screen as a ruler. They were hunters, so they could track this stuff better than you or I could today. More importantly, you need to know the red lines in all of these scenes are the limits of the sun on the horizon, or the solstice points, and the green lines are just the potential range of the moon on the solstices. The orange line with the notches is the ecliptic, and the solstice points are further worked on here as the 6-9 symbol for Cancer, the traditional marker for the summer solstice since Greek times. But in Gobekli Tepe's time, it was in the Scorpion, which Euphrates River tradition also says was like a tree, especially when rising in the east here. And then the other solstice point was in Taurus. So this first spike is a very little one compared to the rest, but it's there, and we can say this first spike, we're going to compare them all at the end, but I'm saying for this one, the first spike is 9743 to 9742 BCE, which in NASA's language is negative 9743, 9742, and 9741. You'll see in a minute too, where the nodes were there in the solstices and then they moved on. Now, I'm talking over these first few eclipses because this is just the start of the ramp up to the actual spike in the data. It's just a few years away here, actually probably one more 9.3 year cycle away here. Again, each notch is 50 years, and here's 9750 to 9700 BCE. NASA tells us there's a margin of error here in stellarium of a few hours going back this far in time. But at the end of the video, we'll discuss the results of this tour through time, because as we go, remember, if any of these 4-hour eclipses happened high overhead, a few hours means they probably saw it. And the corroboration needed might be this carbon data on the left of your screen. So just to be super clear, also when you check Stellarium's accuracy documentation about eclipses specifically, it says that yes, it might be off by a few hours, just like NASA says, but that an eclipse is certain. They just don't know for sure how much to adjust a variable in their equations called delta T. We'll come back to that, but I think the Earth would have had to take a heck of a pounding from tectonic events to be that far off. But they want to be super safe because one little mistake over thousands of years really adds up. So let's look at the next couple of times the lunar nodes came back around. See here, it's high up. And NASA says it actually might be that most calculations should be a little earlier. So this eclipse you're looking at may have happened, I would say 20 minutes, half an hour earlier, something like that. But we're not going to speculate about that stuff because it's not needed here. This would have been a good one to see, but there are better that really mark all these spikes in the carbon data. To any culture you look at in history, an eclipse on the solstice or equinox could be, to quote the Greeks, a thing past mending. This was when the most danger was for some people in their mythologies, but it's also like a benign renewal to some people, where it's like the serpent shedding its skin. Now, we're looking at the entire life cycle of Enclosure D here, from its first carbon date to its fill material a few hundred years later. Anytime you see something between the horns of Taurus, you should take note. This area, the horns of Taurus and the Pleiades, have always been considered like the gateway of heaven to people, because it contains both the sun and all the planets and the moon that follow it on their serpentine paths around the ecliptic. So as you can see in the spike in the data, this is just before 9750, and it's clearly after 9725. So it's somewhere in that 35 to 45 range. And these eclipses are the ones that were overhead that they would have seen. The solstice eclipses. We're specifically talking about solstice eclipses because in the last video, I told you that they were tracking the lunar nodes using these green lines, the lunar solstices, because they were looking for lunar eclipses on the solstices. I believe this is like the cult of Demeter in Persephone, where the gates out there on the horizon only opened once every 9 years. It comes from this stuff. Someday, I don't know, the Hamza hand. I'll do a video on it in the future, but the Hamza hand could be a symbol of, something older than all of our religions. I always think the UN should be at Gobekli Tepe. Okay, going forward a few more cycles. And we get down to this spike. There's a plateau and a spike. It's like sort of a stunted spike. But it's clear. And it's around here. It ends. If the two notches down there, right between them is 9625, then the end of that notch is exactly here where we are, 9622. And it's a beauty. We also can say with a 4.5 hour eclipse, even if it was cloudy, they would see these. There'll be if you've ever been a sky watcher, there's always gaps in the cloud. Even on the cloudiest of nights, there's going to be little gaps, and they saw these things. And I should just mention quickly here on the right, I'm adding an AI chat that'll drag out now from here until the end of the video. So it'll be slow, and you can check in on it if the eclipses get boring to you. If you see blue sky in a lunar eclipse throughout this video, it means that it was most likely in the underworld. They wouldn't have seen it. This one, I've turned the ground off so you can't see it. This one should have been in the sky, but it's a near miss anyways. And this is just to show that after 9622, the nodes move on until more visible eclipses. At the end, so 9590s, it's part of the downslope from the peak we were just at, but it's a little plateau there too. And then there's nothing interesting until the next spike up. Nothing interesting on the solstices. until the next spike up here. And on the way up, we get these. Right, like the carbon data can be pretty specific when you put 4 of them over top of each other like this, actually 5 even, from 3 or 4 different, or 2 or 3 different labs. And they agree so closely. That spike is within a couple, I know the AI chat we've started here on the right is going to say at first, no, you can't do this, but then I'm going to tell it later. We're overlapping carbon data here, and it's going to make it even stronger. Oh, and then here, yeah, this spike might be about this eclipse. It gets dark here even. This is, of all of the eclipses that I looked at close to solstices, this is the closest to a total solar eclipse as there is in the entire 500 years we're going to look at. So we'll look at it a couple of times here. I want you to see it with the big moon just so you can see, and then make the accurate sized moon. And you see this is going to be as close to a total eclipse as you can get, with a few Bailey's beads still popping through. But to them, a solar eclipse wasn't the same thing as a lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipses were linked to the moon cycles of 9, like they were about human pregnancy as well. So that number 9 got linked in our heads. And maybe, like other cultures, a solar eclipse was maybe an argument or something, where the lunar eclipses were a type of birth on the ecliptic, whether new ideas or something specific, or just their idea of rebirth was linked up in it, which is why it's in these enclosures that had skeletons and things in them, skulls. It's rebirth was definitely part of their religion. So at this point, the node should be moving on. But it takes a year or two for the nodes to move through one eclipse. It takes 18.6 years for the nodes to go all the way around. And there's only, for us, there's only 12 zodiac constellations, right? So each year, the node moves through one constellation, but it takes a little longer than that. So it can take a couple of years for the nodes to move away from the solstice points. It looks like it's really close to the solstice point here, but the node's actually a little further along still. Because this is a partial eclipse. It's not a total lunar eclipse like some of these. Here's one that's already happening. If I'm right and all these eclipses should be a little bit earlier, then this one was probably a miss. And a solar eclipse, again, if it's a few, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour earlier, this one would have been pretty good. This would have been like bullhorns on the horizon to them, or claws. I don't want to assume anything that they thought about the crescent shapes. Not quite an annular or a ring of fire eclipse, but it was close. So I'm going to do that once in a while till you turn the ground off so you can see. Like this. Okay, let's pause everything for a moment after this one. It's the big one coming up. I mean, it's not the biggest spike, although it is in the clump that's at the left right now. but it's the clearest. And each sample, like we've said, corroborates the other 3 samples, or 4 even though the other one's a little bit squished. And this is going to flip out our AI chat after. It's going to help narrow this down to a very deep lunar eclipse on the summer solstice in 9511 BCE. And I swear, on these pillars, that's what you're seeing. I swear on my life, these guys are going to timestamp all of this. All the pillars in Enclosure D, timestamp it to 9510, 9511. Can't cover all 4 corners today, but here's one pretty much in full. This view of Pillar 43 highlights how there are 18 of those shapes, or 17 and one big one like 18.6. And these circles are on a pillar aligned so that the moon only sets over it once every 18.6 years. They were using, like I said in the last video, the lunar standstills to track the lunar nodes. They just wanted to know when they were coming back around, when the nodes were coming back around to the solstice points. Like this here, I've in previous videos I've shown that blue line is the horizon. So the red moon is going up on the southeast corner, and the sun is sinking just below the horizon behind you in the northwest. It's an eclipse. And this nudging is a clue to you about what a lunar eclipse meant to them. And here you can see the green serpent that I colored in there marks the beginning of this cycle, if you don't consider the solstice point to be the beginning of the cycle. But again, it's that 18.6 year thing where the moon would only set over this pillar once every 18.6 years, and they mark it right there, right beside the scorpion. They were framing these corners. It was part of their religion. Remember, this 9-year cycle, or 9 times 2, whatever, has always been linked to human pregnancy cycles. This is what a lunar eclipse meant to them. It was transformation and rebirth through this zigzag serpent, and all these T-pillar groups had in their communal buildings these types of zigzags and serpents all together. Might also be why skeletons and skulls are linked here too. Places like, where they've put a headless skeleton to close an enclosure, and even here at Gobekli Tepe, they've found skulls in these enclosures, or pieces of skulls, so they know that there is something ceremonial going on with them in a culture linked with letting the vulture be an usher for the dead. And here it is, the lunar eclipse of 9510. We'll watch it a couple of times here, but this first one, I just want you to see how long it is. It's a deep eclipse. It's dead center. It takes a full 4 hours for the dark part to, it actually is a longer eclipse than that, but 4 hours for the best parts of it. And if the pillar is really commemorating this instead of anticipating it, then we can say again, probably these calculations would have this happening just a little bit earlier in the evening, like it may have been rising eclipsed. And again, it would be linked to something that eventually would evolve into the Greeks talking about Persephone and Demeter and how the gate on the horizon only opened once every 9 years. And after this, the nodes start to move on again. The zigzag serpent shifts along like it does in the sand. You see, you expect a zigzag path in the sand, but it looks more like a smudge because it shifts along. So these next few, as we move forward in time, may have been visible, but the nodes were moving on, so they weren't that interested. You can see the carbon dating almost looks like a measure of their interest level in the special enclosures. The ramp on the carbon spike declines until around here. And as it ramps up again, that spike, like we're looking between 9400 and 9450. And clearly that first spike is after 9425. So we're looking at 9430s and 40s. And I'm going through the dead part here just to be clear. There's nothing there. They were solstice eclipses, but like, I mean, do you count this? Did they see this? Just a little lick? They may have seen it. But again, their interest seems to have been completely tied to lunar eclipses, not solar eclipses. And then by this time, it's definitely moved on. When's this now? This is still in the 60s. But it's not a total eclipse. Okay, so now the AI chat on the right is getting more interested in what we're talking about because of the corroboration. And here's some of the references for when I say that astronomers think that these eclipses, if anything, they happened a little earlier in their a little earlier. I could have done sleep music for this video. Called it Sleep Music in Gobekli Tepe. But it helps me to chill when I'm waiting for my life to start. Oh, and here comes the biggest spike now. The biggest spike on the whole, the entire chart. This is the biggest spike coming up. It seems like the first eclipses that we've been looking at are the ones that are getting their interest, but they're not quite there yet. So the very last eclipse, that's the best one, is usually the biggest spike. It's also a fact that people used scales, the constellation, to extend the claws of Scorpius at one time or another. Who knows what they were thinking here at Gobekli Tepe, but it doesn't seem like they drew it with huge claws on the pillar. It was the other stuff about it that was more important. The zigzagging look to its legs and the skeleton look at on a lot of sculptures around the whole culture are related to that scorpion as well. That's for a future video. Oh, here's a good one. See, again, Taurus, if you extend it, this is still in Taurus. So who knows if, I mean, I'm pretty clear they had a bigger version of Taurus, but we don't really need to speculate about that in this project. So here we go. right on the edge of your screen now, the 9400, just before that. Or after that, I should say. But the biggest part of that spike looks like it's just even after that. So the next time around, the 9.3 after this, maybe. At least that's when they start losing interest again. Maybe there's a good series that leads to that spike. A good eclipse, but that's not in the solstice point. Yeah, 9389 now. Running out of space. Although it could be as late as 78 kind of thing. Oh, well, here we go. This is it. Yeah, straight above. I definitely would have seen this one. It's right on the button. This is the one here. A winter solstice eclipse, because this is in the Scorpion, which means the sun is in the bull. Yeah, that's a good 4-hour eclipse itself. Oh, and here on the right in our chat, I'm telling it something important now. And we look at this eclipse one more time because it was a good one. And then the node starts to move on again. And we start to get a downslope until 9350-ish. But you get one more partial on the way out. Okay, so we're getting to the end now. Here's 9352. On the left, I made it so you can see it's a plateau on the downside. It's not straight down. There's a reason for whatever this plateau is. So let's see if we can find it. And it's on the downslope, so it might not be a great one. But if it's in the solstice, they would have gathered to watch for it. And for this era, I think we have our candidate. Again, they were hunters, so they were tracking an invisible spot. It was an invisible spot in the sky, but it was linked to this world serpent. So maybe they just recorded what they saw, but it's also possible they anticipated. I don't know how they could have anticipated where. Whoa, that 3-year cycle thing. This, if you do 18.6 times 3, you get an approximation for the Saros cycle. So it's like the eclipse comes back around to the same position in the sky. So they could have known. Well, I'm pretty sure they did know that. That's how you wind up with a pillar 55 that has, or pillar 56 that has 55 animals on it, with the vulture grabbing a snake, which it doesn't do in Anatolia. The vulture doesn't eat live snakes, but on that pillar, it's grabbing one, like it's protecting the way for the other animals. Again, check in on the question I'm asking AI here. Okay, and after this one, here we go now to the end. We're going to see the fill material now. When Gobekli Tepe was buried, I know Lee Claire has a thing now where he talks about it's a natural, like, landslide that buried Gobekli Tepe, but it's in the context of other sites that they know they buried intentionally. So it's easier to resolve this in your head if you think maybe when they closed Enclosure D and opened the next enclosure, the heavy T-shapes that they had made for the new enclosure, I mean, you just use those. You push the hill down. You could even have cattle walking on, you capture a bull and you have it walking on the top of the hill. Or the heavy T-shaped pillars themselves. You lay them on the top of the hill and you push them down, and it fills the material into the enclosure. And we're going to find out why here. So we've got 9300 to 9250, and it looks like it takes up almost the entire lump. But you're going to see a spectacular. There's 2 eclipses in 1 year coming up that you figure have to be a reason for the burial. Partly. The other part is the enclosures, the pillars themselves also timestamp 9510. That eclipse was so important that every corner they had they were watching the stars, and they had it. The constellations. I know you don't want me to talk about constellations yet, but I'm gonna have to soon. But they timestamp 9510, and that's another reason to bury the enclosure instead of replacing all the pillars. $92.78. Yeah, it's hard to see a total one here. So interest is there for them to look for an eclipse on the solstice. But if it's a miss, it just means it wasn't quite as spectacular. But they'd have an interest to be there, to gather. And this one's under, at least to start. Looks like a miss. And that one's probably a miss too. Is it the same one? Like it was the same year. Well, this is 76. I know it's coming up. I know that the two solstice ones coming up are gonna, well, they should blow your mind. I don't know why it doesn't blow everybody's mind. Every one of my videos. What do I know? See a bunch of near misses. In Greek language, with their typhon and typhus and python, they call that when one of the tongues of the serpent licked darkly. So you get a little piece that goes eclipsed. That's licking darkly. Well, here we go. This one looks like a hit. This is where we at? 6-8. This might be at 2 in the 1 year. This is the winter solstice. Yeah, right above, straight above. This was seen for sure. But is this the one where it's 2 in 1 year? Because the solstice points move, you can't get 2 eclipses bang on the solstice markers in 1 year. It's impossible. If one is bang on, the other one will be a little off. But this is one of those years it was as close as it could get to both being bang on. And just a note on the right, I'm asking it another important question. Oh no, that wasn't the 2 in 1 year. That was a great eclipse. And like I say, the spike is really not a spike. It's this, the fill material is this entire time frame because there were a bunch of close ones. Yeah, here we go. And then there were 2 in the same year. Next time around. That's it. Here comes the first one. Now we're cooking. It's almost the same as the other one. This was as good a reason as any to say, like the Greeks did, that this kind of thing, having 2 in 1 year like this, could dislodge the foundations of the universe. Like the pillars on the horizon got damaged and the stars even bumped out of place. The stars they'd been using for the 9510 eclipse to mark those corners were no longer in the right places by this time. So why not, I mean, instead of replacing those pillars, you know, just bury the whole thing and be done with it, because it's easier than you got to carve new pillars anyways. And again, if these are a little earlier than it shows here in Stellarium, this would have been a great one. But a great even on the horizon, you know how much an eclipse on the horizon can be amazing. And ancient people did have, I know for sure, in eclipse records in Babylon, they had a thing for eclipses that happened, that 5-minute window you have where an eclipse for the lunar eclipses can be visible while the sun is still visible, which is supposed to be impossible. But because of the light bending around the earth, for a few minutes you can see a lunar eclipse while the sun is still up. That was a special moment and was recorded in eclipse records. And after this, we're done. I'll let you just read the AI chat, and I have nothing more to add other than, you know, the usual like and subscribe, because this is a huge project. It's been 3 weeks. I'm supposed to be putting videos out every friggin' week or day and whatever stupid thing, and I can't do that.